Absolutely. Welcome, fellow Black Brits.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I now, I have more steps to take, I'm sure, because passports and other sorts of things. I haven't gotten a passport, so that's something I still have to work on.
Okay. And I'm sure since you've been here, you've seen some key differences between America for African Americans and the UK for Black Brits. And I was watching a clip of Rick Lewis, who I believe is the chairman of Impact X Capital, and he runs something called Tristan Capital Partners. And one of the things he was saying when he got here, I believe in 2014 or 2016 rather.
No, he came much earlier. He's been here 20 years. So he came in, I think, 2004. Yeah.
Sorry. I missed it by a decade. I'm sorry, Rick, if you're watching. But one of the things he said was when he got here, it was like America was in the 70s, where in the corridors of power, there weren't many in fact, he calls it a lack of diversity. Did you experience a similar thing, albeit a decade later?
Oh, interesting. So you know what? The United States, because of slavery and because of that institution of slavery, has always had, and because of where I'm from in the South, has always had huge numbers of Black people. Some states were actually majority Black during the time of slavery. When people were enslaved, there were majority Black people, no rights, no fundamental rights, but there were some free Blacks. Most, almost, the majority were enslaved. Okay. So, that is sheer number wise very different than the UK, right? The UK, where there's 65 million people here, concentrated in certain areas where therefore it feels like we're much more of the population here in the UK. In Manchester, a bit in Liverpool, a bit in Leeds, a bit in Cardiff, so it feels as though they're these country, but it's very different, the amount of economic heft therefore that we have as a group. So that's what I noticed. The big thing that I noticed, and I have to always say, because Rick has the biggest Black business in the UK. He has 15 billion of assets under management. It's a humongous enterprise and undertaking that he has actually built, with well over 100 employees, and generating lots and lots of money, and people competing to get money into him, behind him as a fund manager.
Wow.
So Rick is he's an exceptional person. I'm glad that he works with me. But if you look at the rest of the people who are also part of my board, Lenny Henry's one of my investors and a board member. Ursula Burns, the first Black woman in the Fortune 500 company. I mean, it's just, you go to my meetings, it's like, oh my Lord. Those are you're like talking to Mount Olympus. So it's great. So, but they're all down for the cause, which is very interesting. Which is something that's very similar between both countries, the United States and the UK. Brilliant. I would say the biggest difference, though, is that the infrastructure which exists as a safety net for Black people, provided by Black people and the Black pound, is very anemic versus the US.
Yeah.
Because we've had generations of Black leadership educated by Black leadership in the Black colleges and universities. We've had, decades, and in some cases well over a century, of businesses that have been run by, powered by, and made large scale by Black people. So that kind of an ecosystem, which means that you can exist. There's a very famous, this person. There's a very famous comedian, Kevin Hart. Do you know Kevin Hart?
Oh, yes, of course.
You know Kevin Hart from Philadelphia. And then Chris Rock. And there's a television show called The Real Husbands of Hollywood, which is sort of, a play on a reality show. In the show, Kevin Hart is talking, and in one episode he meets up with Chris Rock. And they describe themselves as how famous they are. And Chris Rock is famous, and Kevin Hart is Black famous.
Yeah.
So in the United States, you can be very famous and be Black famous. You can be very rich. I mean, that's what Motown was for a long time, Black famous. Ebony was Black famous. It produced the richest Black person in the United States, only serving a Black population.
Yeah.
BET, Radio One, both public companies that were floated by Black billionaires.
Yeah.
They're served by Black people for Black people. That's it. So there is a way in which there's this infrastructure in so many newspapers, not just The Voice, but so many newspapers in every city, from Cincinnati to Cleveland. Everyone had a Black newspaper with a Black editor family and sort of their own version of the Murdochs, a media empire as such. This here in the UK, we don't have that kind of infrastructure. I don't know that we need that kind of infrastructure right now because it's a different world.
Yeah.
But we do need something which allows people to not only compete generally, but to compete specifically. We could actually, can we own the Black hair care products market here in the UK? Organizations like Afrocentrics, organizations like Ruka, organizations like Treasure Trust, that's what they're seeking to do. Can we make them huge scale like Shea Moisture with Richelieu Dennis that was sold to Unilever for 1.6 billion? Of course we can. That's what we need to be doing. And my opinion is that we don't have enough infrastructure. So therefore, Black banks that can loan, Black investment banks that can take you public, all of the sorts of things. If you can't, if the big white companies won't take you, there's an organization that can understand you and will take you, or many organizations, and they'll compete for you. That's the bit of a difference. And if we're on the continent, if we're in Africa, I'm confident in some of our economies, we've got that same dynamic. We've got a dynamic where you have lots and lots of choice. But here we don't have as many choices around that. We don't have as many support systems, and that infrastructure and safety net is what I think creates the other problem. So that when you look high in organizations, there are no Black people that have any power in these organizations. The power, remember the report called The Color of Money, The Color of Power in the UK from 2018, which showed it showed the military, it showed the police, it showed the arts organizations, it showed the government, it showed, and government on many different levels. And it showed how few of those roles were held by Black people. It showed pictures of everybody who was in those positions and how few people were Black people. You look at the government here in the UK and who's in the cabinet. You look who's enfranchised and who's not. Those are things which are problematic and very worrisome.
Yeah.
And so those are the things we have to fight against, and what Impact X and other people are doing, including Rick Lewis. We're trying to make sure that we are infusing, whether it be through our educational approaches that are helping people to get into and pay for college and university and then graduate school and then move them on, whether or not it's investing in businesses, whether or not it's investing in arts organizations like Ballet Black or Chineke, et cetera, or the Kiln, we just continue, or Autograph, we continue to say all those institutions are part of the infrastructure to make us a better and make us a stronger participant in the world as it currently exists.
Wow. That's a lot there.
Wow.
Wow. We're going to talk about
too much. I'm sorry. I'll stop talking.
No. This is brilliant. We're going to talk about the book specifically in a minute, but I wanted to kind of link what you were saying to something I read in the book about a call you got from Tom Ilube when you were on your way to the States. And I was so excited to hear about that meeting and the Black Hand Gang. And that made me literally jump out of my chair, because I thought, for too long we've talked about it. We've talked about the problems. We've griped about the problems. But here was a group of people saying, hey, no longer time for griping, no longer time for talking. Let's focus on solutions. So I guess those are some of the things that the Black Hand Gang are grappling with in terms of creating that infrastructure change and, fixing the anemic support system. So guys, if just go out and get this book, you will not regret it. It is such a brilliant read. I don't know if this is an English word, but it is totally unputdownable. Part manifesto, part biography, but all Eric Collins.